Hey everyone, my name's Caleb, and I want to talk about something that caught me off guard. Something that slowly chipped away at my sense of peace until I couldn't ignore it anymore. My girlfriend Rowan and I have been living together for 3 years. We met in Portland. Mutual friends, open mic night, all that romantic crap people like to write songs about. She had this spark, this chaotic, creative fire that made everything feel alive. I was the calm one. Steady job, tidy apartment, coffee. At the same time every morning, somehow we fit. At least that's what I thought. But lately, something's changed. It didn't happen all at once. There wasn't some huge fight or dramatic cheating story. No one stormed out. It was quieter than that. Slower. Almost like waking up in someone else's house and realizing all the furniture's been rearranged. Familiar, but not right. It started when I told her I couldn't fund her art project. Rowan's a sculptor. Talented, no doubt. But she hasn't held a regular job in over a year. She says it kills her creativity, and I get it. Truly. But when she came to me asking for nearly $3,000 to rent a pop-up gallery space downtown, I hesitated. Not because I didn't believe in her, but because rent was due, and my car needed repairs, and we weren't exactly swimming in cash. I can help with part of it, I said, trying to keep my tone neutral. But I can't cover the whole thing. She didn't yell. She didn't argue. She just shut down. That night she went to bed early, didn't say goodnight, didn't touch me. For the next few days she was cold, distant. She stopped kissing me goodbye before work. Barely looked up when I walked into the room. At first I thought maybe she was just disappointed, and I figured it would pass. But then I started to notice a pattern. Every time I said no, or even hesitated, Rowan would go quiet. No fights, no talks, just emotional retreat. And not just with her words, physically too. Her body would stiffen when I reached out. She'd scoot further away on the couch. Nights that used to end with laughter or making out turned into her scrolling her phone with her back to me. It wasn't just rejection, it was punishment. At first I blamed myself. Maybe I was being too frugal. Maybe I wasn't supporting her. Dreams enough. I bent over backward to fix things, picked up extra shifts, cooked her favorite meals, took her to places I couldn't really afford just to see her smile again, and it worked. For a while. When I gave her what she wanted. Whether it was money, attention, or just silence when she was annoyed, she became sweet again. Like flipping a switch, she'd laugh, kiss me on the neck, curl up in my lap and say things like, "You're the only one who gets me." But the more I gave, the more I felt like I was losing myself. And the turning point? It wasn't some big moment. It was something small. Almost stupid. It was about a chair. I had this old leather armchair I loved. Worn in, comfortable. My grandfather gave it to me before he passed. Rowan always hated it. Called it hideous. Said it didn't match her aesthetic. I always told her it was staying. It was mine. But one day I came home, and it was gone. I walked into the apartment and saw a brand new modern chair sitting in its place. Slim, gray, and painfully uncomfortable. I froze. Called out her name. She popped her head out of the studio, like nothing was wrong. "Surprise," she said. "I finally got rid of that eyesore. Doesn't the room feel more open now?" I didn't even know what to say. I just stared at the empty corner where my chair had been. "I told you I liked that chair," I said quietly. She rolled her eyes. "Caleb, it was falling apart. Come on, you're acting like I burned your childhood teddy bear." I didn't argue. Didn't yell. I just nodded, walked into the bedroom and closed the door behind me. That night, I didn't reach for her. Didn't try to hold her or make peace. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, realizing I was living with someone who didn't respect my boundaries, and worse, I had let it happen. The next morning I left for work without saying goodbye. It was petty. I know. But I needed space. And that space, it made me think. I thought about how I used to love coming home. How I used to feel excited to share my day. How her touch used to feel like comfort, not reward. When had I started earning affection like a paycheck? Over the next week, I changed something, not with her, but with me. I started going to the gym again, Not for her, for me. I dusted off my camera, started taking photos again, wandering through the city during golden hour like I used to before. Life became a game of walking on eggshells. I made plans with old friends, said yes to a camping trip I'd turned down last year because she didn't like bugs, and I stopped asking for permission. When Rowan asked why I was out so much, I didn't give excuses. Needed fresh air, I said. Needed to think. She didn't like that. She started texting more, calling during the day just to ask what I was doing, coming into the living room more often when I was on the phone, watching me, studying me. She wasn't used to me being this distant. But the thing is, I wasn't being distant. I was just done begging, done apologizing for existing in a way that didn't revolve around her moods, and people noticed, my friends noticed, even strangers noticed. There was something different in the way I held myself, I guess. More sure, more grounded. And Rowan noticed too. The coldness started melting, but not because I gave her anything. It melted because she realized I was no longer clinging to her warmth. I don't know exactly when it clicked for Rowan, when she realized that the grip she once had on me was slipping, but I could feel her start to panic. It wasn't loud. She didn't confront me or start yelling. That wasn't her style. No, Rowan's version of panic looked like quiet desperation wrapped in politeness. She started waking up earlier, making breakfast, asking me how I slept. She'd never been a morning person, not once in the 3 years we lived together. Now, suddenly, she was offering to make omelets and pour coffee into a travel mug for me, like we were some picture-perfect couple from a Hallmark ad. And at first, I went along with it, said thanks, took the coffee, ate the eggs, but I didn't offer much else. Because here's the thing. I'd spent so long adjusting myself to fit into her life, her moods, her preferences, that I wasn't even sure what parts of me were left. And now that I was finally putting myself back together, I couldn't go back to pretending. One night, about a week after the chair incident, I came home to find her on the couch, looking up restaurants on her phone. "Hey," she said, casually. "I made us a reservation at that new Italian place on Hawthorne. You've been working so hard lately, I thought we could use a date night." I paused by the kitchen counter, dropping my keys into the bowl. "Sounds nice," I said slowly. "But I already made plans." She looked up. "With who?" "Eli. And Marcus. We're grabbing beers. Haven't seen them in a while." She blinked. "You didn't tell me." "I didn't think I needed to." That silence between us? It was thick. She nodded, almost like she was trying to mask how thrown off she was. "Right, of course. Go have fun." And I did. That night with the guys felt freeing. I laughed, really laughed. Told stories without worrying about how Rowan would interpret every word. I didn't have to tiptoe around anyone's ego. And when I came home, I didn't feel guilty. Not even a little. The next day, I noticed something different. Rowan wasn't cold, not exactly, but she wasn't trying either. It was like she had pulled back again. Like she was testing whether I would chase her like I used to. But I didn't. Instead, I spent Saturday hiking alone, left a note on the table. Out for the day. Needed some headspace, no explanation, no apology. When I got back, she was sitting at the dining table with her laptop, pretending to be absorbed in her work, but I could see it in her eyes. She was unsettled. That night we barely spoke, and for the first time, the silence didn't bother me. Because I had stopped trying to win her affection like it was some prize at the end of a test. I didn't need to earn peace anymore. I was creating it. But then things took a turn I didn't see coming. It was a Thursday night. I was coming home late from a photo walk, camera still slung around my neck. When I walked in, I could smell something cooking. Rowan was at the stove stirring pasta wearing that dress. The green one I once told her was my favorite. She never wore it anymore. "Hey," she said without turning around. "You hungry?" I set my camera down. "I could eat." She smiled over her shoulder. "I made the mushroom sauce you like, and garlic bread. From scratch." I didn't know what game this was, but I sat down anyway. The food was good. I'll give her that. Halfway through the meal, she reached across the table and put her hand on mine. I froze. "I've been thinking," she said. About us. Here it was. The speech. I know I've been distant, she continued, and I know you've been pulling away. I can feel it. I guess I just thought you'd always be here no matter what. I didn't realize how far I'd pushed you until you stopped pushing back. Her voice was soft, but I could hear the quiver underneath. I'm not trying to manipulate you, she added quickly. I got used to knowing you'd always show up, always make things better. And when you didn't, it scared me. I didn't say anything. Not because I didn't care, but because I wanted to make sure I wasn't being pulled into another cycle. I miss us, she whispered. I looked at her. Really looked. Her eyes weren't just sad. They were uncertain. For the first time in a long time, she looked like someone who wasn't sure if she still had a place in my world. And I'll admit, part of me wanted to reach across the table, squeeze her hand, and say we'd figure it out, that it was okay. But the other part of me, the part that had been ignored, belittled, emotionally starved for months, wasn't ready to jump back in. I believe you miss us, I said quietly, but I don't know if you understand what us means anymore. Because I can't go back to being the only one holding things together. She nodded slowly. Her hand slipped back into her lap. We didn't finish dinner. That night, she came to bed earlier than usual. No cold shoulders, no turning away, just her body next to mine, quiet and still. For the first time in months, she didn't flinch when I reached for her hand under the covers. We didn't speak, but we didn't need to. Something was breaking down, and maybe, just maybe, something else was beginning. But I wasn't naive. I knew words were easy. Real change takes more than confessions and home-cooked meals. It takes consistency, it takes action, and above all, it takes respect. Something we had both forgotten how to show. So I closed my eyes that night with her hand. In mine, wondering if this was a real turning point, or just another loop in the cycle. The days that followed felt suspended, like we were both walking carefully through a field of glass, afraid to make the wrong move. Rowan was trying. I saw it in the way she folded my laundry without a word, in how she lingered a little longer in the doorway when I left for work. She'd even started texting me small things throughout the day, photos of the cat curled in weird positions, a random meme, a song she thought I'd like. All things she used to do when we first moved in together. And honestly, part of me wanted to believe that maybe this time it would stick. But something in my gut told me it was too easy. One Friday evening, I came home a little early. The sun was still up, spilling gold through the windows. I walked into the apartment quietly, expecting her to be in the studio, but the door was cracked open and I could hear her voice. She was on a call. I'm trying, okay? Her voice was hushed but urgent. No, he hasn't brought it up yet. I think he believes I'm being genuine. I stopped in the hallway. There was a pause. Then she laughed, a low, uneasy sound. No, I'm not playing him. I need things to settle down. If he leaves now, I'm screwed. Another pause. Don't act like I'm the only one who needs time. You're not exactly rushing to fix things either. I didn't hear the rest. I didn't need to. I stepped back quietly, grabbed my keys, and left the apartment. My heart wasn't racing. I wasn't angry, just empty. I walked around the block twice before heading to the nearby diner and ordering a coffee I didn't drink. I sat there for over an hour trying to process what I'd just heard. I'd spent weeks thinking we were rebuilding something, that maybe Rowan had finally seen me, really seen me, and realized what she'd been doing. But that phone call, it cut through every word she'd said like a hot knife through butter. This wasn't reconciliation. It was damage control. She wasn't rebuilding our relationship. She was stabilizing her life, and I was just the foundation she didn't want to lose. Later that night, I returned home. Rowan was on the couch with a blanket draped over her legs, flipping through a magazine. She looked up and smiled like nothing had happened. Hey, she said, you okay? I nodded, took off my shoes, and sat in the armchair. My armchair, the one I had quietly dragged back from storage a few days earlier. I need to talk to you, I said. She tilted her head slightly. Okay. About what? I looked at her. Not with anger, but with clarity. About us. About what I overheard earlier. Her face froze. I came home early, I said. Heard you on the phone. You said I believe you're being genuine. That you're not playing me, but you need things to settle down. That if I leave, you're screwed. She opened her mouth, but I raised a hand. Don't lie. Not now. She lowered her eyes. I'm not going to scream, I continued. I'm not even mad. I'm just done. Caleb, she started, but her voice cracked. You're not a bad person, Rowan, I said gently. But you're not in love with me. You're in love with the life I provide. The stability, the sense of safety. That's not true, she whispered. But it is, I replied. And maybe you didn't realize it until I stopped bending for you. Maybe that scared you. But trying to hold on by pretending, it's not fair. Not to me, not to you. She sat in silence, eyes glistening. I'm moving out, I said. I've already made arrangements. I just wanted you to hear it from me, not a note on the counter. She stared at me like I had just flipped. The entire world upside down. When? She asked, barely audible. Sunday. The weight of that one word filled the room. For the next 2 days, we lived like ghosts. She didn't try to stop me. I didn't try to comfort her. We just existed beside each other. Two people who had stretched a relationship so thin, it finally snapped. On Sunday afternoon, I packed the last of my things. She stood at the door, arms crossed, but not in defiance, more like she didn't know what else to do with them. I turned to her before leaving. I hope you figure out what you really want, Rowan. And I hope you find someone who gives it to you, freely, not because they're afraid of losing your love. She didn't say anything, just nodded. I walked out, closed the door, and didn't look back. It's been 6 months. I live in a smaller apartment now, less polished, but it feels like mine. I've got my armchair, my camera, my peace, and sometimes that's all you need. Do I miss her? Sure. Sometimes. There were good parts, real moments, but missing someone isn't the same as needing to stay, because love, real love, doesn't come with a scoreboard. It's not earned. It's not withheld. It just is. And if you have to fight to prove your worth constantly, you're not in a relationship. You're in a performance. I finally stopped performing, and it was the best decision I've ever made.